Welcome back to my channel, or to my channel if you are new here. My name is Ivy, and today we are going to be doing another true crime video. I know it has been an absolute hot minute since I have done one, and I kind of messed with the lighting today, so let me know if it looks awful, if you like it, if it looks better, if it looks like I have like an angel halo above my head. If you have any comments about it, just let me know. But today we are going to be discussing the Darren Rainey case. I saw this float around on Instagram about a month ago. Never had heard of it. The pictures are extremely graphic, so just a bit of a disclaimer. We'll be talking about sexual assault. There'll be graphic images. This video is not for young eyes. So without further ado, let's just get right on into the video. So Darren was born on January 24th of 1962, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and from all of the resources that I saw, Darren's schizophrenia was pretty severe, and at the time of his death he was serving 2 years in prison for a cocaine possession. He was currently being held in the Dade Correctional Institution in Dade County, Florida, which is like near the Miami area if you're not familiar with Florida. So on June 23rd of 2013, he was being punished for defecating in his cell and refusing to clean it up. They are allowed to punish you in facilities like this. That's not like a miscommon practice. And the way that they were punishing him was by putting him in the shower. And the guards who put him in the shower turned up the water to 180 degrees, which is almost double the temperature of your body, and left him in there for 2 hours. Other inmates in the prison said that they could hear him screaming to let him out, that it was burning him, that it hurt, and the correctional officers were just laughing, asking, you know, is this hot enough for you, kind of just taunting him the entire time that he was in there. And then after he had been in there for about 2 hours, inmates said that they heard a thump, and right after that, correctional officers and guards were yelling for medical assistance. I believe he was pronounced dead on the scene. 90% of his body was covered in 2nd or 3rd degree burns. His internal body temperature was so high it didn't even register on a thermometer. The thermometer didn't go up that high. The autopsyist said that his skin was peeling to the touch, so even if you just touched his body, his skin would fall off. And that was not due to burns, that was due to decomposing. So he literally had started to already decompose within just like minutes after he had died from how hot this shower was. So obviously this led to an inmate dying, and investigation was launched. The investigation actually lasted for 5 years, and it was eventually resolved with the head Miami prosecutor, Catherine Rodriguez-Rundle, deciding not to charge any of the officers involved, including Sergeant John Fan and officers Cornelius Thompson, Roland Clark, and Edwina Williams. So Catherine Fernandez-Rundle, I'm just going to call her Rundle, has a decent play in our story. She has been the Dade's Miami prosecutor since the 1990s, and she has never once charged an officer with shooting on duty, or an on-duty shooting, I believe is the right way to word that. She didn't charge any of these officers, so she's kind of known for being a bit of a pushover when it comes to the police department, and siding with them most of the time over the inmates or the other people involved in other police altercations. She's actually up for re-election. I believe election day is August 18th. One of her former employees, Melba Pearson, actually quit. She was employed by Rundle, and she quit so she could run up for re-election against her, and a lot of people say that if you want to help in this case at all, the best thing to do is to vote against her. So I seriously doubt any of you are voting in Dade County, but if you are, there's just a little snippet of information of how you can help out with this case. But all of the 4 employees involved in this have not been convicted of the crime. They've not been charged for anything. They really haven't been held to any accountability for it at all. And as far as I know, John Fan Fan is currently working for the Florida Department of Corrections. Cornelius Thompson is working in a Florida prison. Roland Clark was hired by a Miami police department and was put under investigation twice for having sex on duty, and due to the rise in popularity of this case, they actually terminated him. So Darren's family has not publicly come out and made any statements about his death, but they did file a lawsuit in 2018, which was then settled for $4.5 million. So in 2015, Julie Brown actually did her own little investigation. She's a journalist against this particular correctional institution, and published an article in the New Yorker regarding the abuse, and that was my main source for a lot of the information that I have for this video today, and I will leave that along with a couple other resources down below if you want more information on this. So that is all of the information that I have on Darren Rainey's case, his death, the aftermath of his death, all of that. But now we're gonna get into more of the in-depths of Dade Correctional Institution. So we're first going to be talking about a woman named Harriet Shashevsky, who started working at the Dade Correctional Institution as a psychiatric technician. So shortly after she started working there, inmates were going up to her and saying that they were being starved. And she initially brushed this off as them being delusional, them wanting extra things and kind of fabricating things. And then she started to overhear inmates talking about how their food trays would often come empty. And she couldn't deny that a lot of the patients were extremely thin, and she eventually brought her concerns to Dr. Christina Perez, who oversaw the inpatient unit. Now, Shashevsky was a pretty timid woman. Oftentimes, people in her position in jails are looked at as victimizing the inmates and siding with them and getting the guards in trouble, and the guards will call them hug-a-thugs and kind of do whatever they can to make their job a little bit more difficult, and they will all kind of turn against them because they're with the inmates, as with the guards are against the inmates. So she really did try to brush off a lot of the first warning signs that there was something a little bit sketchy going on in this correctional facility, because she didn't want to put her coworkers against her, basically. So Dr. Perez completely brushed this off, just saying that the inmates were fabricating it, that she was new, so they often pry on the new workers because they're more susceptible to believing them, things like that. And Shashevsky actually thought, you know, guards have a really hard job, they're overworked, maybe underpaid, they're just a little stressed, and really gave the guards the benefit of the doubt. But when Perez kind of just brushed her off, she was like, well, the guards hackle the inmates all the time, they'll go tell them to kill themselves, that they're worthless, that no one would miss them if they're gone, etc, etc, etc. And obviously when you do this to people who have severe mental disorders, that's pretty significant to do to someone with a severe mental disorders. So Shashevsky then said about how she had seen guards hackling inmates, telling them to go kill themselves, they're worthless, they'll be better off dead, just things like that. And again, Perez rubbed them off as, you need to keep a good relationship with the guards, they're the ones who protect you in here, you know, don't put your nose into business that you don't belong in, just kind of like warning her to stay out of it and kind of pretend like it wasn't going on. And Shashevsky was a pretty small woman and could have easily been taken over by the inmates in here. And a lot of times people with mental disorders don't know how physically strong they are. So even if they're not trying to hurt you, they easily could, or if they're only trying to roughen you up, they could easily seriously injure you. And when the guards kind of found out that she was kind of tattletaling on them a little bit, she noticed that she would often be left alone with no guard there. she would try to make up these extra activities to help with their mental state, and they would leave her alone with them. Prisoners would come up to her and threaten her or make sexual comments at her, and there would be no guards around, and she was kind of just very susceptible to anything that would happen to her in here. So again, she was discouraged from speaking out about the things that she was seeing going on in the prison, because not only did she have the guards against her, but by sticking up for the inmates, she was turning the guards against her who protect her from the inmates. So she kind of just brushed everything off, let it go, tried to go back to normal and ignore everything, just kind of for the sake of protecting herself. Inmates were also required a certain amount of activity hours every single week, and she would often pitch doing yoga or doing musical therapy or drawing. She brought in chalk one time, all things that are proven to help your mindset, to help your stability, and every single time she was shot down saying that they weren't safe, or she would bring in supplies for them to do things and they would just throw them out. She would see inmates going from highly functioning to never leaving their room, refusing to eat, refusing to take their medication in a matter of days or weeks. And she really did try to avoid saying anything. The economy was pretty rough at this time. This was around like 2010, 2011. But there were a lot of jobs in prisons. She lived with her mom and her 2 kids and her husband. Her husband was making minimum wage, and they really just could not afford for her to quit. So despite the fact that she was really starting to hate her job and it was bringing her so much stress, she couldn't quit because they needed her income to survive. So then in 2011, Krzyzewski and Perez ended up holding another meeting, and this time a psychotherapist named George Malincrot also attended the meeting and said that one of the inmates had shown him bruises all over his body and said that guards had dragged him from his cell and essentially just kind of beat the tar out of him. And Krzyzewski and Perez both kind of rubbed this off, that Malincrot was a hug-a-thug and that he was pitying the inmates and going against the guards, blah blah blah. And Malincrot was really starting to go against these guards, basically telling them that they were sabotaging them because they weren't allowing the inmates to get any better, so they were just getting more and more on their caseloads. And Perez and Krzyzewski really thought that this guy had kind of like gone off the rails a little bit, and even though Krzyzewski had experienced a lot of these things with these inmates, she rubbed it off like everybody else did and didn't believe this guy, even though she herself knew that this stuff was happening too. So after this meeting, Krzyzewski was kind of more on the lookout for mistreatment in this facility. It was kind of like the seed had been planted in her head, and she started noticing the sanitary conditions in there. There was mold everywhere. They had a really bad cockroach problem, to the point of it being in like the microwave. So this is a little bit of a side story, and it's gonna seem a little bit irrelevant right now, but I promise it does have relevance. Because there were cockroaches in the microwave, she had no way to cook her ramen noodles, which she often brought for lunch, and she noticed that the tap water actually got hot enough to cook the ramen noodles. So that's how she was making them. She was just running the water until it got hot and cooking her noodles that way. So then in June 2012, she had heard about an inmate named Darren Rainey who had defecated in his cell, was refusing to clean it up, and kind of just having a bit of a breakdown. And she had also heard of the guards saying, oh, we'll just like throw him in the shower. And her, being a little bit naive, was like, okay, like a hot shower, that usually calms people down, reduces their stress levels, gives them a second to chill out, cleans them up, and didn't really think anything of it until she found out the next day that he had actually died. So the next day, one of the nurses had told her that Darren Riley had died, and she just assumed that it was a suicide right off the bat. And the nurse was like, no, like the shower was 180 degrees and he was literally cooked from the inside out. And that's where it kind of hit Krzyzewski that like they didn't turn up the water heater so it could cook people's lunches. They turned it up to literally fry inmates, and that's where it kind of all like clicked in her head that where she was working was not an okay facility. And she immediately was like, well, there's going to be a criminal investigation, someone's going to be held responsible. And the nurse was like, no, they're just literally like, the prison's going to cover it up, like nothing's going to happen. And Krzyzewski, who was still kind of new to working in this business, was kind of appalled by this, and it really ended up taking a toll on her mental health. She was dreading her job, dreading to going to work. She had so much stress, her hair was beginning to fall out, and she was just not going to last at this job very much longer. So she kind of brushed this off as, I don't have to report it, someone else will. And obviously nobody else did, wanting to protect themselves from the guards just like everybody else. And they actually ended up getting a new warden, I believe in 2013. His name was Jerry Cummings, and he had made all of these false promises about how the facility was going to change, people were going to start being held accountable, the rules for punishing the inmates were going to change, and pretty much nothing happened. So then in 2013, Krzyzewski actually got promoted to staff counselor, which she really, really enjoyed, and this gave her the opportunity to be one-on-one with the inmates, really get to kind of counsel them, talk to them, treat them like human beings. And one of her patients, Harold Hedstein, actually told her that this whole shower treatment, many of the inmates had been objected to, and this particular inmate actually had OCD, and because of this he kept a very, very in-detailed journal of a lot of the punishments that happened in the correction center, and he had a detailed description of how big the shower was, and through his estimation, he had guessed that you could stand at the end of the shower and the water would only graze the top of your feet, so you could salvage most of your body from getting burnt by the water. And because of this, they actually discovered that he had passed out after about 2 hours in the shower due to the lack of ventilation with all of the steam. So this inmate wanted more attention drawn to the abuse happening at Dade's, and that is actually where Julie Brown, the writer of the New Yorker article, got most of her information, was from this particular inmate. And then Krzyzewski ended up leaving shortly after this. I believe she left sometime in 2013, I'm gonna guess it was near the end of the year. Julie Brown had published her article. Jerry Cummings, the jail warden, was put on administrative leave, and Krzyzewski was already working at another job, and I don't know if I want to use the word trauma, I don't know if that's too aggressive, but all of her memories from working at the prison kind of resurfaced. She stopped eating, her hair was falling out so bad that she just ended up shaving her head, and she kind of realized that even though she had left the correction center, the inmates hadn't, and they were all still there and nobody was helping them, and just because she had kind of been able to suppress those memories, they were all still enduring all of that. So she ended up meeting with another employee named Lolita Richardson, and she had told her of a story that in 2013 an inmate named Richard Marr had hung himself and left a suicide note filled with some pretty crude things, but the main take on this suicide note was the records of the abuse that he had been keeping that was happening in the prison. He said about how they were starving the inmates, that the guards would pull them out of their beds at night and force them to fight each other and bet on it. The guards would purposely have the other inmates sexually assault whoever they were fighting, like during the fight, if they knew that that inmate had been previously abused in the past. Just kind of story after story after story of abuse. I mean, some pretty aggressive, intense stories. And after this article had been published, George Malincrot had published a book called How to Get Away with Murder about Darren Rainey specifically. I'll have it linked below. I believe it's like $15 on Amazon. Krzyzewski also was encouraged by her therapist to write down some of her memories with her job, and she has also a 52-page memoir. It has never been published, but there are stories in it that are published in the New Yorker article, which I will have linked below. But after this article came out, just more and more and more people, it's like that saying, once the dam breaks, the flood comes, and more people just started saying that they had seen this abuse. The inmates kind of started sticking up for each other, which, again, like, the inmates really did try and stick up for each other, and the employees at the facilities were just not encouraging that or helping them with that at all. And because of this article, multiple lawsuits, rule changes. The main reason for this all coming about is the fact that someone did, due to their punishments, which are essentially just torture, died, and no one's being held accountable for that. I mean, it's great that they're changing the rules and the facility itself is being held accountable, but none of the actual people are being held accountable yet, as far as I know. If you guys have any information on this case, on Darren Rainey, please leave it in the comments below, or just leave your thoughts. And then to kind of end this video, I just want to share some sending thoughts with you all on my opinion on it. So again, I will have multiple resources listed below if you guys want to know more on this. I know this is kind of an unsatisfying ending. I'll look up like petitions or places that you can donate involving this case. I don't honestly know if there are any. One thing that I want to say is that the reason why I wanted to do this video and specifically talk about this prison is because this is just one that people eventually came out and started speaking up about. But you guys, I guarantee you this happens in every single correctional facility. And a lot of experts say that people with the most severe mental disorders will end up in prison just because of the way that society kind of, I don't really know how to explain it, it makes sense in my head, but just the way that society is with them and how they don't have the resources that they need. Like, if you can't get the drugs for your mental disorder, then you're just gonna buy other ones, you know, like cocaine or heroin or methamphetamine, and then go to prison for them and endure this. And how can you expect someone to get better, which is why they're in here? You don't, like, they're in here for that specific reason, to get better, so when they get released from prison, they'll be better functioning in society. And how do you expect them to get better when you're literally objectifying them to torture every single day? And a lot of these places won't give the inmates the proper medication. So not only do most of them not have good psychiatrists or therapists, they're not even getting the medication that they literally need to function. And if you guys look at those resources below, you'll see there are it's just story after story after story after story of abuse, and it's all just same thing, different shapes kind of thing. And I really do think this happens in so many facilities, and this is one of, I mean, this could honestly be considered a success story, one that actually did receive a little bit of repercussions for their actions. But it is only the beginning. Fingers crossed that prosecutor does not get reelected. I do believe that one of the big things that they're running on is holding guards and police officers accountable for their actions, which should be done. So I guess we will have to wait and see how this one pans out. It wouldn't surprise me if nothing ever comes of it. If, you know, as far as I know, 3 out of the 4 correctional officers are still working in prison systems or police departments. So, you know, they're still doing it, they just have different victims. And it's one of those things that this only ever came about because somebody did die, and it's just really heartbreaking to see things that somebody has to die in order for anything to happen. But that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think of this case, if you think anything will come about it. If you have any case suggestions below or anything you'd like me to cover, please leave them. But thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video, and I will see you in my next one very, very soon. Bye, guys.